a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations. So we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data, so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg to...
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
We're Cadent. Keeping you and our people safe is our main focus, and our vital work must continue. You'll start to see more of us in your area as we increase our work to upgrade the gas pipes to keep the energy flowing into your homes and businesses. We may need to come into your home to complete this work, but rest assured our engineers are following all government guidance on PPE and social distancing. We continue to provide the critical gas emergency service, and if you smell gas, call 0800 111 999. To all other key workers, we would like to say a big thank you from everyone at Cadent. Cadent, your gas network.
Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are rising while treasuries slip with the dollar as investors decide that the global rally in risk assets has more to run. Contracts on the S&P 500 points to gains at the open, which would put the index on the cusp of wiping out losses for 2020. Oil producers and cruise lines, including Occidental Petroleum and Carnival, are jumping in the U.S. pre-market. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 22 points. Dow futures up 250. NASDAQ futures up about 11. The DAX in Germany's up 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 4/30 seconds, yield 0.90%. The yield on the 2-year 0.21%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.4% on 55 cents at $39 a barrel, and COMEX gold is up 0.6%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen Moscow, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance worldwide on Bloomberg Radio. It's important with all the distractions we had, particularly the protests over the weekend, to get back to an update on the pandemic. Here is Joshua Sharfstein of Johns Hopkins University.
I have been worried about some of the police tactics and how, it's particularly if they're arresting a lot of peaceful protesters and putting them inside together in jails. We know that that is a location where the virus has spread quite a lot. More generally, I think that there's a little bit of a sense, and I'm just saying generally that, okay, we're now moving past coronavirus, but we can't move past coronavirus because the virus is still there and still has the same logic that it always had. So whether we're, protesting, which I think people are protesting the right things, it's incredibly important, or whether we're doing other things, whatever it is, we have to have the coronavirus in mind to keep it as safe as possible.
What about schools? Is the reopening of schools something that needs to be done more quickly than we have so far, or less quickly?
Well, we have the fall coming up in the United States when school would normally open. Kids have really suffered not being in school. It's very important that kids not only get, education, but breakfast and lunch that comes with school, the supportive teachers, the social interaction with friends. All that's extremely important. I think it should be much more of a national priority to get ready for school. But school will look a little different this fall. Still have to keep the coronavirus in mind. And so there are ways to reduce the risk, like keeping small groups of kids together all day, spacing out the desks a little bit more, extra cleaning. But, we've really got to get on that now for us to be ready in the fall.
Why have we had such a different response from a lot of European economies reopening some of the schools? I'm thinking of France, I'm thinking of the UK compared to the US. Well, most schools won't reopen until September.
I think that typically in the United States we don't have school over the summer, so I think people are going to take the summer to prepare for the fall. Kids are going to lose more ground over the summer, unfortunately. I can't tell you why, what exactly is happening in other countries based on what their school schedules are. I think they're starting relatively slowly in most countries, and they're going to have some experience that hopefully we can learn from here.
What is the one thing that you would learn looking back at what's happened over the last 2 to 3 months?
Well, I think that we've really come to appreciate how important this asymptomatic spread is before people get symptoms, that they can really spread the virus on, and that has led to, big shifts in our understanding of how to respond. That's been hard-won knowledge in a way, because a lot of people have gotten sick, particularly in nursing homes. But I think it really tells us that there's a certain scenario we really want to avoid, particularly, large groups of people indoors, people who are vulnerable. We need to figure out ways to use equipment, reduce events, do other things to stay apart from each other that really prevents that kind of spread from happening.
How much do we understand about the virus? I know we understand more than what we did even 3-4 weeks ago, but can it morph? Can this virus become something else come next winter?
I don't think it's going to morph that much, but I think you can have all kinds of dangers with respiratory season and flu happening at the same time. We really don't understand a lot about what the virus does to the body. There's a lot of evidence pouring out about just the impact on so many different systems. A story today about the brain, their blood vessel issues, their blood clot issues. It's a very, difficult and serious illness for a lot of people. And I think that's made it hard. On the other hand, we are learning some more about treatment, and I've been heartened to see some of the studies come out about convalescent serum, the use of antibodies, that, if it's too late, it doesn't work. But earlier in the disease, it appears from several studies that there are real signals of benefit, and there's some bigger studies happening, and that could provide a really, really important way to help people before they get really sick.
I know there are various reports or various thinking on why it affects people so differently. When will we have a better understanding of who's most at risk?
I think it's going to be a gradual better understanding. I don't think it'll be a particular day, because there are all kinds of different angles to look at. Is it, does it relate to people's blood type? Maybe. There's some signal there that type A has a harder time with the virus. Are there particular genetic signals, say the receptor that the virus binds to? People are looking at that but haven't seen that quite yet. It may not be that we can find it. In fact, some people think that there's an element of randomness. Did you get a huge dose right at the beginning? Maybe that just gives you a worse course, and all these other little things don't matter. So I think that picture is going to emerge slowly. Hopefully we will have some real treatments without having to figure out all the details of the pathogenesis.
Joshua Sharfstein with a nice update there. It's been good to talk to those physicians and nursing administrators and such at Johns Hopkins University. And Paul, I think really with the protests and, of course, the horror of the looting earlier in the week, but just the protests through the weekend and all the uproar with the president and, of course, the mystery about what the president's going to be doing this week. I know he's got some meetings this morning. I think, Paul, do you agree with me? We've really taken our eye off the pandemic dynamics.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I think really for the last week, it's kind of taken into the back pages a little bit of the news, Tom. And I think it's time to kind of reassess kind of where we are here again. And we're having some of these reopenings, Tom. I mean, most notably today in New York City. So we're starting to have some of these reopenings. But it'll be interesting to see, let's say a week from now, to see how the new cases data across some of these regions where we have seen these mass protests, if there is in fact an increase in cases, because we've almost become used to the Governor Cuomo chart showing kind of a decline in new cases and ventilators and all the data metrics that we've come to know. So we'll have to see if there's any kind of rebound in some of those numbers to the downside, I guess, if you will, after some of these protests. My quick summary of this for folks is New York has been remarkably good statistics. Some other cities as well. There are some real challenges across this country right now, particularly in terms of hospital capacity of smaller cities and towns. Please stay with us from Reopening New York. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney, and the opening bell brought to you by SEI. Since its founding 50 years ago, SEI has provided investment managers and asset owners with robust infrastructure platforms and flexible outsourcing solutions. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. The S&P 500 is higher at the open. It's up about 0.3%, up 9 points at 3202. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 0.6%, up 163 points at 27,271, and the Nasdaq is up 0.1% or 9 points at 98.23. 10-year Treasury down 132nd, yield 0.90%. The yield on the 2-year 0.21%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.7% on 69 cents at $38.88 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $11.70 at $16.94.70 an ounce. The euro 1.1309 against the dollar. The yen is at 109.13. Tom and Paul.
Gonna mince words, folks. Karen Moscow, thanks so much. I'm sorry, Paul. Did I step on you? Excuse me.
No problem.
I'm so sorry. I'm just dazzled by the reopening. I can feel the glow in New York City.
So as you look down on the street, Tom, does it feel any different?
Yeah, no, this weekend, every weekend has been better. There's no question. Traffic is not back to the nutso New York traffic it's famous for, but, you know, it's getting, my 2 cents is open the stores. Quick as you can. Everybody wears a mask. Somebody wants to wear rubber gloves. Fine, I get it. Open the stores. The human interaction will work, and hopefully we can control the pandemic. Did I editorialize there? I'm sorry, Paul.
That's okay. I think you voiced the opinion of a lot of New Yorkers.
Why don't you bring in our esteemed guest here?
Chris Crisante is someone we love having on.
Got that right.
Bloomberg Surveillance. He's now got a new firm, Tom, MAI Capital Management. We'll talk about that a little bit. But, Chris, I look at the market here. I'm going to start off with, up almost 45% off the lows. And I do that with the backdrop of these brutal employment numbers. We're going to get a horrific GDP print for the second quarter. But I guess the stock market does what the stock market does, which is look ahead, discount the future. Are we a little bit ahead of ourselves here, Chris?
I sure think so, Paul. I went to bed last night. I had this really bad dream that there was a virus that led to a pandemic that led to the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. But I woke up and I looked at the S&P chart and I knew I was wrong.
That's right.
So that's kind of, and there's a tension. Those of us who are in the value camp, like we've been for 20 years, we're looking at these cheap airlines or banks, and we're thinking, is it time, or should we have bought 3 weeks ago? And for the first time in 20 years, Paul and Tom, we're not bottom fishing, because we do think that things have come back too far too fast, and that there's going to be a comeuppance when the earnings start coming in. And, Tom, you're right. New York is a better place than it was a month ago, for sure. But I think there's going to be some long-lasting effects from this, and there's going to be some second-order effects that are coming.
Yeah, I'll make no bones about it, Chris. This is the most important day for our listeners and viewers worldwide. It's just real simple. You're a guy with real money at work, and you're value prudent. Usual drill. What did you do the middle of February? And what did you do the middle of March? What did you actually do with your portfolio?
Well, we did some smart things and some not smart things. But the smart things we did, Tom, is we threw early. everything that was cyclical and travel related overboard. And we sold Delta, we sold Disney, we sold Booking, and now I have to say Disney is 15% higher than when we sold it, even though it went down another 30% and came back. So that's what we did, and we moved to the companies that we call margin protectors, folks that can operate well, healthcare, communications, technology. And they weren't the cheapest ones, but they did protect the margins, and they just didn't go down nearly as much.
And how are they positioned for it? I mean, I love this, folks. This is so important to go into sectors and cross sectors based on a ratio approach. So these are, what you call them, margin protectors?
Margin protectors, Tom. And so if you really think that we're off to the races and the economy is going to steadily go higher from here, you would leave my margin protectors because they're not cheap. And you'd go towards the banks, the airlines, the autos, because they're just so beaten down. We just don't think that's the scenario that's going to unfold over the next 6 months.
Paul, that's terrible. That's terrible jargon. We have to describe that. A margin protector, folks, is called private school tuition. Okay,
that's right. Exactly. So, Chris, I guess you're not. I guess you still have some reservations about kind of the top line growth of the U.S. economy, the top line growth of the S&P 500. So you're staying away from some of those folks that need that revenue acceleration to drive earnings.
Absolutely. I feel like it's a patient whose heart stopped. We gave him the adrenaline kick, which was, all the stimulus, both fiscal and monetary. His heart restarted. Everybody's jumping for joy, but he's not the same guy he was 3 months ago. And so that's what we have to see, and that's what we're causing. Reasonable people can differ, but we think there's a lot of indicia. What I'd like also to talk about, you guys, are the second-order effects that are coming. They're economic and political. And you had the Hertzes and the JCPenney's go down, and that wasn't shocking. But there's other companies out there that were healthy that, as the tide goes out, we'll see who's not wearing the rating suit. So, stay tuned.
All right, so it's interesting. So we had the Fed come in, and the Fed has been very active in terms of supporting the market. Do we need another round of fiscal stimulus, Chris, for this economy, for maybe some of the more conservative investors to say, okay, I do believe in this rebound?
Yeah, I think we eventually will, Paul. I think what will happen, not unlike 2008, is there'll be a recovery, and then the growth will slow and even stop and recede, and then there'll be calls for fiscal and monetary stimulus that will be answered. I don't think you're going to see huge stimulus plans in the next several weeks, simply because things have come back pretty quickly.
What do people do who are all in cash? Somebody emailed in and said, ask them that question. But Chris, you're always in the market. You're up, you're down, and I have great respect for that. What is the percentage of our audience that's missed the boat? I mean, Druckenmiller was out this weekend saying he missed the boat as well. What do you do, Chris, if you've missed a boat? Load the boat on Apple? What do you do?
No, I don't think you do, Tom. I think it's really hard to sit on your hands. But as you guys said at the beginning, I think we're well ahead of ourselves. So, I feel very strongly that there will be better times to invest. I'm not necessarily expecting us to go back down to the lows, but I sure wouldn't take that cash off the shelves today or this week. I'd wait. I'd do your research. I'd pick the names that you like, and then opportunistically deploy it over time. Don't try to make up for the 40% kickback that we've had over
Thank you. Thanks for rubbing that in. Thank you.
So, Chris, we may get a big trade, M&A trade in the big pharma space. Bloomberg News reporting that there may be some talks between AstraZeneca and Gilead. I mean, does that suggest that maybe corporate CEOs feel a little bit better about things just holistically, and that maybe that gives you a little bit more confidence?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on, Paul. One is that debt is just so unbelievably cheap that if you had some M&A on the drawing board before everything started, it just seems that much more attractive right now. And the second thing is maybe they feel better, or maybe they feel like, if this is going to be a tough time, we'd rather be bigger than smaller. So I think the stronger will take advantage of this, just like the bigger financial companies coming out of the financial crisis took advantage by buying some of the smaller firms at discount prices. So I think M&A is coming back. I think that is a sign of healing. I think that's all good, but I wouldn't say that it's a sign that that they feel excited about the future.
What about Apple? I mentioned it. I make a joke about it, folks. But, these 7 stocks that are 142% of the S&P 500. Chris Casati, what do you do with these high flyers? Come on. You're not going to tell me to sell them, are you?
No, not at all, Tom. And in fact, these are some of the margin protectors. I hate to come on the show and sound boring and uncreative.
So Apple's a margin protector?
Oh, for sure. And it added value in the crisis, and it found ways to go towards less hardware and more high-end stuff like services. So they've got a great product and they're managed well. So does it get too expensive sometimes? Sure. Is it worth taking the tax loss or trying to find something else just as good? Probably not. Especially since in the last 3 or 4 weeks it's lagged. So, I would, there are worse things than stuck being owning a bunch of apples.
Exactly. Well, how about energy? I know in your latest note you're still not keen on energy, but we've seen WTI pushing up to 40, a nice rebound, although it's off about 1.6% today. What do you feel about energy here? Are they out of the woods?
No, I don't think so, Paul. I think that this is, again, the patient has been given the shot of adrenaline, and he's rising from the dead, but he's still not in good shape. I mean, energy is about the worst, it's the perfect storm of bad news, which is fracking gives us an almost endless supply of oil at the same time where travel and everything else has been so greatly reduced that demand goes down. So, you got more supply, less demand, and, OPEC is falling all over itself to try to cut and try to keep the cuts. And, we'll see. So you get some good headlines and it goes up, but long term, I would not deploy long-term money there.
Chris Cassanti, thank you so much with MAI Investments. Greatly appreciate that. With our news in Washington, here's Amy Morris.
Thanks, Tom. A new reform bill set to be unveiled by House Democrats today will focus on holding law enforcement officers accountable for any misconduct and increasing transparency. Acting Deputy of Homeland Security Ken Cuccinelli says it is an outstanding discussion to have.
It's very important that those discussions take place at the state and local level, because for 99% of law enforcement in this country, or well over 90%, I don't know the exact number, they are state and local officers, and the state and local governments control the training and the deployment and the accountability of those officers.
The Justice in Policing Act would overhaul legal protections for police, create a national database of excessive force episodes, and set new standards for police training. It would revise the federal criminal police misconduct statute, making it easier to prosecute officers who are involved in knowing or reckless misconduct. Chancellor Angela Merkel's government says it has received no official word from Washington on any plans to withdraw U.S. troops from Germany, saying that they are only aware of what they've seen in the news. It is the latest sign of deteriorating relations between the two countries. And most Americans are concerned about the spread of the coronavirus. They're pessimistic about the economy returning to normal this year. And they don't believe President Trump can unite the country. 63% are worried they or someone in their family could catch COVID-19. The NBC Wall Street Journal poll shows 8 in 10 U.S. voters believe things are, quote, out of control. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Tom and Paul.
Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Tom, I know New York is opening today. That's big. But I'll tell you, I spent the weekend down at the Jersey Shore, and people were out. They were social distancing. And when they were in groups, they were wearing masks. So it appears that people are behaving. So I'll be interested to see how New York City does as you guys begin to really open up. But on the Jersey Shore, they're trying their best to kind of get back to normal in the context of kind of the new world we live in.
I was talking to the family member in China, and of course they're like X months ahead of us and all that. And what they said was really important, in that there's an action. And it takes about 2 weeks for the human condition to try to figure out what that action is, like open the restaurants. And it took 2 weeks. In Shanghai, it took 2 weeks after they opened the restaurants for everybody to figure out how to behave in restaurants, act in restaurants, get comfortable in restaurants. I mean, I'm looking out right now at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. You wonder when they open, how they open. The Prado in Madrid, I believe, opened this weekend. Maybe it's today they open the Prado. Same idea, you know. Everything's going to be an experiment.
It's going to be an experiment, and people, people are going to figure things out, Tom. I think they are. I think people have got a new reality here, a new appreciation of kind of the world we live in. So we'll have to see. But again, New York opening. Markets are open. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Fauci, it turns out, is not a mutter. This is Fauci the horse, to be clear, who just competed at Belmont Park, the first day of horse racing in the state of New York since officials shut down the sport in March. His owners gave him the name this spring in honor of Fauci the man for all his efforts fighting coronavirus. Unfortunately, his debut was marred with rain, and Fauci couldn't live up to his fame. The world's biggest jewelry firm is going green. By 2025, Pandora will stop relying on newly minted gold and silver and instead use only recycled precious metals without any apparent impact on cost or quality. In other jewelry news, COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter protests might be putting the LVMH acquisition of Tiffany in jeopardy. The $16 billion deal was to be the luxury industry's biggest marriage, a tie-up meant to fight Richemont's Cartier. But now, it may be the latest victim of virus-related economic upheaval in the U.S. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Global news 24 hours a day on air.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't. And I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones. And you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Dear Dad, Happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective Podcast.
What about Giannis Antetokounmpo? He is going to be eligible to sign a Supermax extension, which we were projecting to be worth $240 million this summer. Well, if the salary cap drops, and even if he's wonderfully happy in Milwaukee, it may make no sense for him to sign when he can just wait a year and wait for the revenues to recover and then lock in.
Subscribe to Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective.
Search the Hoop Collective to listen.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. The S&P 500 up 0.4%. It's up 13 points at 3206. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 0.9% or 247 points at 27,352. And the Nasdaq little change down 0.1% or 10 points at 9803. 10-year Treasury up 2/32, yield 0.88%. The yield on the 2-year 0.21%. NYMEX crude oil down 1.6% on 65 cents at $38.90 a barrel. And COMEX gold is up 0.6% or $10.30 at $16.93.40 an ounce. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene here on Bloomberg Surveillance, and now making a guest appearance, Shonali Bastick, our chief financial correspondent. Shonali, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you on with us, and with us as well, Robert Collins with Partners Group. And this is really interesting, folks. This is a huge, huge deal for global Wall Street. The idea of private equity, more long-term locked-up investments in 401ks. Mr. Collins, we're thrilled you could join us today with Bloomberg Surveillance. The arch issue here is private equity appropriate for a 401k? You need liquidity, fungibility, etc. How do you squeeze a 5 and 7 year hold into a 401k?
Well, delighted to be here, Tom. Great question. I think that the big picture here is that the Department of Labor has taken a major step forward in modernizing 401k plans and enabling Main Street investors to get access to this type of asset class that's only been available for large institutional investors in defined benefit plans. And what the guidance does is address the considerations that the sponsor needs to evaluate, one of which is liquidity. There's several considerations, but now that the department has given this guidance, given this framework that sponsors can use, they can now, for the first time, have that same best-in-class institutional portfolio available for all investors.
Robert, what does this mean for the ordinary American? These are generally known to be the most expensive investments on Wall Street. Will an ordinary person have to be paying that much to get private equity in their portfolios?
Yep, that's a great consideration. What the guidance demonstrates and addresses is how these investments can be used in professionally managed, diversified portfolios within 401k, such as target date funds. It does not address how an investor would invest directly into a standalone option in a 401k plan, but how can a pension plan sponsor include these investments in a diversified portfolio? And one of the considerations they have to evaluate, and one of the considerations addressed in the guidance, is performance net of fees. So sponsors have to evaluate that, and what the record shows 3 decades now is that these investments have provided a benefit net of all fees and expenses, and that's why you see employees who have defined benefit plans, why you see the wealthy, why you see large institutions actively investing in private equity for so long now and successfully.
So
and what this guidance now allows is investors with 401k plans to benefit from that same diversified portfolio.
But the bottom line then is still that it will be expensive for the ordinary American to access. Don't you think that would be a deterrent in that case?
Well, what you have to think about is the outcome, and this is active management. This is not passive management, and the outcome, the benefit net of all fees, is there. So I think the guidance makes an important point, which is you have to look at that net of fee performance. And what the guidance also addresses is the risk that if you do not allow investors to have access to these investments, you're not getting exposure to the broad economy. And this is the point that the SEC was making in this unprecedented announcement last week, which is that the number of public companies is decreasing, and investors, if they don't have access to this broadly diversified portfolio, including private equity, they do not have exposure to the real economy.
Robert, we have time for one more question, which is tragic. We got to have you on for another 3-hour conversation or something like that. We'll talk Tulane football when we're done. Robert Collins, I'm absolutely baffled by the idea that I've got $142,000 into 401k, and I'm going to put X amount into private equity. What is Partners Group going to put me in? A pizza shop in Queens? Or, how does it work? I mean, is it going to be 6 diversified ideas or 42 diverse? I mean, are you going to diversify away the individualistic feel of private equity?
No, you will have a diversified portfolio to several hundred, if not thousands of companies is our expectation, and a product itself that is regulated within a additional regulated environment of the 401k plan. So massively diversified. These products exist today. Partners Group is one firm that has them. There's another. And they do provide the benefits of private equity in terms of performance, in terms of diversifying performance. But it does take a great deal of product innovation And we're now glad that the marketplace is innovating as well to enable them.
Too short of this. This has been great. We look forward to continuing this. Robert Collins with Partners Group. Thank you so much for joining Bloomberg Surveillance today. Shonali, New York is reopening. Is New York Wall Street reopening?
Not in full, Tom. They'd like to get the traders back, but they're not going to get them all back in full force today.
Where's everybody? Out in the Hamptons? I mean, what?
Yes, the Hamptons, Cape Cod, you name L.A. They're on the beach.
You're calling from that clam shack in Orleans, Mass, or in Chatham?
They're still getting the lobster rolls for $35. Let me tell you that.
Why do I know that's true? Shonali Bazik, thank you so much, our chief financial correspondent, and Robert Collins here, Partners with Paul. What do you think? You were listening to that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing here. I think there's been a democratization of the market where you're trying to get more and more people into some more and more of these products that historically, been for institutional investors or, uber wealthy investors. And the question is, can you manage the risk?
Come on, you're diversifying away the alpha. Right? There's no question private equity has alpha. I totally take Mr. Collins' point, but help me here. I'm gasping. It's just too much oxygen. But I mean, come on, we're diversifying away the alpha because you have to do that to participate in a defined contribution structure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you think about where the alpha is. It used to be in hedge funds. One could argue, as I do, that game has been played out. Really, the only place where you see some of these asymmetrical returns, Tom, these extraordinary returns, is in private equity. And even those returns have come down over the last 10 or 15 years. We used to talk about, Henry Kravis and his IRRs of 20+%, but those days are pretty much played out across the board.
It'll be interesting to see, to say the least. We leave you with really interesting markets. Interesting markets this morning. Let me do a data check here, which can help out as we can. The Dow's up only 272 points. I guess that's lower than Friday. SPX up 13 points. The VIX 25.22, and yields, of course, migrate higher. We are produced calmly by Richard Truman. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language?
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones. And you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
The Woj Pod with Adrian Wojnarowski.
Doris, you had reason to believe that you needed to get a test for the coronavirus.
Right. Well, I mean, let's just start with the headline, which is I did test positive for COVID-19. I was so tired from Saturday the 14th through Tuesday, March 17th. I kid you not, I could not be out of bed for 5 minutes without needing to go back to bed and lay down.
Search the Woj Pod to listen.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Ready to talk brass tacks on what's happening in Major League Baseball? Turn to the Effectively Wild podcast from Fangraphs for daily statistics, analysis, and commentary.
One team will say, yeah, we're going to keep paying minor leaguers their stipend, and another team will say, we're going to extend the stipend through this month, and then another team will say, nope, we're cutting them off. So are extending it at least through August, which would basically be the end of the minor league regular season.
Search Effectively Wild on TuneIn to listen.
Come on the Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
How do you kind of view the volatility in the marketplace here?
The harshest downturn for American workers in history.
Companies across the board, across industries, really trying to shore up their balance sheets.
There's very, very disturbing dynamics at work.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
There's only so much that you can speed up vaccine development. Because of all the dislocations, there's always relative value trades that you could be doing.
This could be a U-shaped recession rather than a V-shaped recession.
It's the uncertainty, I think, that is really spooking everyone.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Audience, the equity markets are mostly green here in early trading today as more countries and cities around the world continue to open, including New York City, Phase 1 reopening today. A historic day for Bloomberg Markets radio program as Bonnie Quinn joins us as Lisa Bromwich heads to Bloomberg Surveillance full-time. Bonnie, welcome to Bloomberg Markets. Bonnie Quinn. We don't have Bonnie.
Paul, I think you're talking to me. Well, I am absolutely delighted to be back. I think in the words of Michael Jordan, it might be appropriate to say I'm back.
That's right. Thanks. We're going to have a lot of fun here. Talk about on Bloomberg Markets. We really focus on the markets, the opening, what's driving markets every day here as we get this market open. And Vonnie, we've had no shortage of just market moving news really over the last several months. It's just been extraordinary. Coming up on the program, we'll take a look at value stocks as the market has bounced more than 40% off the bottom. Right now, let's go to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm here for you, Paul. Stocks are up while treasuries and the dollar are down as easing lockdowns bolstered the economic optimism across the markets. Oil's down. The S&P is extending a rally from this year's low to more than 40% now and is on track to ease this year's losses. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is up 0.3%, up 10. The Dow's up 1%, up 264, and the Nasdaq is down 0.2%, down 17. The 10-year is up 4/30 seconds with a yield of 0.88%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is currently down nearly 2% at $38.77 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% at $16.9460 an ounce. The dollar yen, let me take a close look here, is currently at 108.85. The euro is $1.1309, and the British pound $1.2691. The prospect of a record tie-up in the global healthcare industry is helping stir deal-maker confidence that mergers and acquisitions activity can rebound from its deep coronavirus slump. British pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca made a preliminary approach last month to U.S. rival Gilead about a potential merger. Well, that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now we continue to move on with Bloomberg Markets, Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. We appreciate that. As Greg was just mentioning, we got the markets open. We've got green on the screen here, except for NASDAQ trading down off just slightly here, but the S&P and the Dow both up higher. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson joins us here. Dave, where's the action underneath the hood?
Well, I tell you, it looks like a continuation of last week, really, in a sense, because if you look at the best performers among the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500, you've got energy stocks, you've got industrial companies, you got financial companies, and they were all kind of at the forefront in the past week. I mean, energy notable in light of the agreement from OPEC and other producers to extend output cuts, and Saudi Arabia's decision to raise prices for some crude exports by the most in at least 2 decades. So, you're really seeing some gains in that group. Just looking at some of the best performers in the S&P 500, you see Marathon Oil up 13%. You see Occidental Petroleum with all the issues they've had in terms of their debt they took on when they bought Anadarko Petroleum last year and everything else, up 12.5%. And at the same time, you see airlines higher, which is saying something. I mean, given that higher oil prices tend to increase their costs, I mean, that's really taken sort of a back burner to the bigger issue of what kind of business the airlines have at this point in terms of capacity. But you look at American and Delta and United all solidly higher at this point. American and United both up more than 8%.
So, Dave, it would seem that this is less a reopening trade and more an oil trade in particular today.
Yeah, to some extent that's the case. We did see last week that energy stocks were kind of at the forefront of the gains, really kind of reversing what we've seen over the past several months with that group taking some of the biggest hits. And actually, you could go all the way back to last year and make that case. So while energy's at the forefront, it's in terms of composition, it looks fairly similar. What's notable today, you mentioned what's going on with some of the technology stocks, also that communication services group in the S&P 500. Those two areas, of course, communications includes, Facebook and Alphabet, the owner of Google, and some of those other companies. And they're down today, which is saying something. I mean, they've kind of been trailing the last few days, but they weren't outright lower as we're seeing in today's trading.
Vonnie and Dave, really cool story or interesting story on the terminal today about Stanley Druckenmiller basically coming out and say, I missed it. I missed this rally off the bottom. Because we heard some pretty prominent voices, in addition to Druckenmiller, kind of back at the bottom saying, boy, the world is just too dangerous here. Too many unknowns out there. I can't bet the market. And here we go with this more than 40% move off the bottom.
Yeah, it's really saying something, isn't it? I mean, David Tepper, Appaloosa Management is another hedge fund manager that comes to mind. And by the way, Appaloosa is part of a story today involving PG&E, the California utility coming out of bankruptcy. Appaloosa also, Dan Loeb's Third Point and some other investors agreeing to buy more than $3 billion of a $9 billion stock sale that the utility is doing in order to get out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And with all that equity being sold, you got PG&E shares actually up 2.8%, which is saying something.
Yeah, I mean, the Stan Druckenmiller comments would seem to suggest that nobody is looking for another leg lower, that we have avoided that possibility, right, Dave? I mean, there was talk of that for such a long time, and now even the strategists are upping their estimates for the S&P 500 for the end of the year.
Yeah, it's the sheer magnitude of the recovery that's got people kind of scratching their heads as much as anything. Yeah, there was a lot of talk over the past several weeks that, the rebound wasn't going to hold up, that you were going to get another decline. I mean, that's still a possibility, let's be honest. Who knows what people are going to do once you see the second quarter results coming out. And we know they're going to be downright awful when you look at the S&P 500. Our latest figures pointing to about a 44% decline in profit for the quarter. That said, I mean, if people can see it now, they can anticipate it. And they're also anticipating the recovery that the estimates we've compiled here at Bloomberg suggest for the third and fourth quarters and then into next year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we think about the second quarter numbers coming up, Dave, it's really, I guess, it's going to be one of those times when it's not so much about the quarter, but it's about the guidance and the tone that we get from some of these companies as, a lot of their markets begin to open up around the world. What do they think about Q3 and 4? Because actually, and I don't know, Vonnie, in your reporting, if you felt this same way, I'm hearing a little bit more about the V-shaped recovery in the economy.
Definitely, you read it a lot, but Paul, I'm yet to be convinced, and it's not like I've done any mathematics on this, but at the same time, you sort of have to wonder where the second leg of the V-shape will come. I mean, obviously, we're going to be ticking up as New York City reopens and as cities around the country reopen, but will it continue on up?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's again, I think as we hear these second quarter numbers, it's going to be really about the forecast for a lot of these management teams. What are they seeing in their market? So we'll certainly be on top of that. And Dave will be on top of that, as he always is every quarter. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thanks so much for joining us. And Fonnie, it's interesting here. This bounce off the bottom here, it's caught a lot of people by surprise. I mean, you hear people like Stanley Druckenmiller and David Tepper. It just shows you kind of really how extraordinary the downward move was, how much the market lost, how quickly, and then the bounce back.
Yeah, a little bit of chagrin that they didn't take more risk. It's not often you hear people of that caliber deciding that they didn't take enough risk, but it does go to show you, Paul, how little we knew and how little we still know about what's actually going on economic damage-wise, and whether the recovery will be just a simple recovery or a very prolonged, protracted, difficult recovery. And of course, nobody could predict exactly how much the Fed was going to do.
Yeah, exactly right, Fonnie. And so, I mean, the Fed, I mean, I think as we've all kind of seen, they came early, they came aggressive, they came with, I think, a very clear message for the marketplace, and that's kind of what we've seen, maybe a little bit less so from fiscal stimulus out of Washington, D.C., but the Fed has been very clear, as has been the ECB and other central banks around the world in dealing with this pandemic. Right now, let's head down to our Washington, D.C. studios for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, 2 weeks after a Minneapolis police officer held his knee to George Floyd's neck, mourners are going to get the chance to view his casket in his hometown of Houston. A 6-hour viewing is scheduled this afternoon at the Fountain of Praise Church. Joe Biden plans to meet with the Floyd family and provide a video message at the funeral. He's not attending in person. He says he doesn't want his Secret Service getting in the way. President Trump meets with law enforcement this afternoon as the rhetoric from protesters shifts from Black Lives Matter to defund the police. The Minneapolis City Council took a big step in that direction over the weekend, pledging to disband their city's police department. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry says he wouldn't go that far.
Am I for entirely abolishing the police department? No, I'm not. And so over the coming days and weeks, I'm looking forward to working with council and talking with them about deciphering what particularly they mean when they say ending and abolishing.
The council members still don't have a specific plan. Any change to the Minneapolis City Charter would need the mayor's approval and a public vote. Back in Washington, congressional Democrats are introducing a sweeping set of police reform measures. The Justice in Policing Act would overhaul legal protections, create a national database of excessive force incidents, and set new training standards for officers. Before that, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is about to lead an 8-minute, 46-second moment of silence, the length of time former officer Derek Chauvin held his knee to George Floyd's neck. Chauvin makes his first court appearance today on charges including second-degree murder. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
It's a stock market driver.
Now they're starting to see a little bit of panic from policymakers.
It's a global political force.
How will this epidemic reshape big tech and its relationship with Washington?
It's a virus.
This coronavirus is a global pandemic.
Is there a safe haven?
And the facts matter.
The situation is so bad because of the virus that is simply unavoidable.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Are you interested in a challenge?
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
We're Cadent. Keeping you and our people safe is our main focus, and our vital work must continue. You'll start to see more of us in your area as we increase our work to upgrade the gas pipes to keep the energy flowing into your homes and businesses. We may need to come into your home to complete this work, but rest assured our engineers are following all government guidance on PPE and social distancing. We continue to provide the critical gas emergency service, and if you smell gas, call 0800 111 999. To all other key workers, we would like to say a big thank you from everyone at Cadent. Cadent, your gas network.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Uncle Ben's rice, 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets, only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
We're pleased to be reopening drive-through lanes and McDelivery. But helping keep you and our team safe is our priority, so we have fewer people working. And to make social distancing easier, we've installed screens in kitchens and service areas. Before reopening, all our restaurants will be deep cleaned, and we'll be cleaning equipment and surfaces even more often. For now, we're open for reduced hours and serving a reduced menu. And to keep everyone moving quickly and safely, please use contactless payment. With smaller teams, service will take longer than usual, so thank you for your patience. To see if your local McDonald's is open, visit mcdonalds.co.uk. McDelivery at participating restaurants only.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P is extending a rally from this year's low to more than 40% and is on track to erase this year's losses. Gilead Sciences, maker of the only U.S.-approved coronavirus treatment, has jumped as Bloomberg News reported. AstraZeneca has made a preliminary approach. Gilead's up 0.5%. Noble Energy soared after OPEC and its allies agreed to extend crude output curbs by an extra month, though Saudi Arabia signaled it wouldn't continue with additional deeper curbs after June. Noble is up 2.4%. Airlines and cruise companies are advancing. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is up 0.25%, up 8. The Dow's up 1%, up 258. And the NASDAQ is down 0.25%, down 24. The 10-year is up 4/32. The yield is 0.88%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 3.4% now at 38.23 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.9% at 16.9740 an ounce. The dollar yen 108.86. The euro $1.1306, and the British pound $1.2693. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
And welcome back to Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Markets with myself and Paul Sweeney. Delighted to bring in our next guest, now a regular on the show. Bill Smead joins us from Seattle. Bill, great to have you to discuss these markets.
Thanks for having us.
So, when the market hit lows back in March, your son Cole was on. He said it was one of the great stock buying opportunities in history. It's clear that he wasn't wrong when you have the likes of Stanley Druckenmiller saying he didn't take enough risk at the lows. What did you do exactly, and how has the trade worked out?
Well, we tacked toward the opportunities that were created by the complete destruction of economic optimism. And we operated under the theory that at major historical change points, the existing trend gets exacerbated, the positive part of it, to the upside, and the existing trend gets exacerbated to the downside. So what you had was a complete and total capitulation on value, and a complete, you've had the biggest growth orgy maybe ever in the last 4 or 5 years. So that was exacerbated in March. I could see that, even though we were practically nauseous every time we put in a buy order. We tacked toward the deepest, most out of favor things that people thought wouldn't come back anytime soon. They thought it was going to be years before anybody wanted to go shopping. And then now we found out that even looters know where to shop.
So, Bill, give us some sectors where you think there's some value. There's still some value. Again, we've had this big, strong move off of the bottom here. Has the low-hanging fruit been had, or where are you guys still looking here?
Well, certainly the most extreme bargains have had a big bounce, but this is a historical change point. So where there's still lots of value, the banks were as cheap as they were at the bottom in 2009. But yet, on a relative basis, just think how cheap they were then if they matched price to book value similar to back then. So Wells Fargo was all the way up to 33, down from, 60 or 55, right? There's loads of room in the banks. There's loads of room in the owners of the malls. We have been doing a lot of channel checks. We are in Arizona, so we've been going to a lot of malls and outlet malls, and we're seeing Macy's, which we don't own the stock, but we own the malls where their stores are located. The parking lot on both sides at Arrowhead Town Center was packed. So I find it so fascinating. Everyone is thinking about how our behavior is changed by being imprisoned for 2.5 months. And I think they're forgetting that once we're not in prison, we're not going to be super attracted to things that we had to do when we were in prison. They're going to be attracted to things they weren't able to do while they were in prison.
So, Bill, it's interesting when I think about it, some of the market bounce here, and I'm not sure the market, or let's put it this way, how do you feel about a potential second wave and how that might impact the economy and the markets? It seems like most people feel like there will be a second wave of this virus. Is that something that you are thinking about as you think about putting trades on?
The biggest risk in the stock market is that the market massively overcapitalized growth stocks. That's the biggest risk in the market. let me just give you one example, and not to pick on them because they're a great company. This has nothing to do, the things I'm going to say now have nothing to do with the quality of the underlying company. But let's just take Costco, for example. Will business ever be better for you than when the government closes most of your competitors and forces people to only come to your store? Does it ever get better than that? Well, the answer is no. So Costco is a relatively mature, large growth company, and it's trading at 35 times earnings. If you go back and look at history, a mature, highly thought of growth company would trade at 20 times earnings. So if the S&P 500 topped out early this year, which, by the way, we're not convinced that the S&P is not topping out here, then those glamour growth stocks have got huge PE reductions to go through. It's like a weight loss program. Oh, I need to lose 30% of my price earnings ratio. Well, to do that, you more than likely have to lose 25% of your stock market value. So that's where the risk is. The risk is not that there's a correction in the deeply oversold stuff that has bounced. The risk is, I mean, look at today. Somebody comes out, puts a 3,000 some odd price target on Amazon. Is there any institutional investor on the planet that hasn't stocked up on Amazon? Who's the buyer at the margin going to be? Where's the money going to come from? The situation is, it looks very attractive for value investors if they can keep from getting hurt too much on holding winners from the growth sectors that have performed so well.
All right, Bill, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you. That is Bill Smead there of Smead Capital.
Yeah, they were going in, buying some things at the bottom there. So he's obviously had some nice trades there. The value stocks were even more value back in March. But the value stocks, as you know, Vonnie, have kind of always been a tough trade for investors.
Yeah, and of course, as he said himself, the things that you were doing, you won't want to do. And indeed, the stock and like Netflix, for example, they're down today, the at-home stocks, as you say. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are climbing with the Dow up more than 200 points. There is strong investor optimism in an economic rebound. Focus will now turn to the Federal Reserve's upcoming policy meeting this week. Chair Jay Powell's comments will be watched closely if he thinks further stimulus will be needed. Two drug makers heavily involved in the response to the coronavirus pandemic are considering a merger. AstraZeneca is said to have made a preliminary approach to Gilead. A deal would be the biggest ever in the sector. AstraZeneca is co-developer of an experimental coronavirus vaccine. Gilead makes the only U.S.-approved treatment. BP plans to cut 10,000 jobs as the pandemic accelerates the company's move to slim down. And Apple plans to let customers buy many of its products by monthly installments. Bloomberg has learned that Apple will offer a 12-month interest-free payment plan for iPads, Macs, and several other devices. Customers will have to use the Apple credit card. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
This Independence Day, it's a Boston Pop salute to our heroes, presented by Bloomberg and Eaton Vance. While the fireworks won't take place this year, the Boston Pop's 4th of July tradition will continue, with new music paying tribute to the heroes of the current health crisis and honoring the memories of those we have lost. Watch and listen July 4th starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. COVID-19. Can the world reopen for business?
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School. a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Dear Dad, Happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's Classic Game Replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search Classic Game Replays to listen for free.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
As the pandemic spreads to emerging markets, we will speak to banker to the world, Bill Rhodes, President and CEO of William Rhodes Global, to get his thoughts on what it means for emerging markets. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett for Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg, what do you have for us?
We've come off the earlier highs, Paul. It's based on speculation the surge from this year's lows outpaced prospects for an economic rebound. Oil is down. Tech companies weighed on the S&P as the gauge got close to wiping out its 2020 losses. Dow Jones Industrial Average outpaced major benchmarks led by Boeing, and cruise companies advanced. The NASDAQ 100 fell from a record high. We check those markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is now up just 0.1%, up 5. The Dow is up 0.75%, up 200. And the NASDAQ's down 0.1%, down 10. The 10-year's up 7/32 with a yield of 0.87%. West Intermediate crude continues its slide, Dow down 3.75% at 38.07 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 1% at 16.9940 an ounce. The dollar yen 108.73, the euro $1.1305, and the British pound $1.2686. Companies taking advantage of one of the best corporate debt rallies in decades to buy back debt and lower interest expenses. eBay is borrowing $750 million to help repurchase notes due next year. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, welcome back to Bloomberg Markets on this Monday, June 8th. It's an important day for New York City, of course, because it is the beginning of the reopening of the city. It's obviously one of the most important economies in the entire United States. It's also seen more deaths than any place else in the United States, and so how the two will intersect and whether we will see some increase in hospitalizations and cases as time goes on, we will have to wait and see. But phase one certainly including things like manufacturing and so on. But obviously other places around the world have been opening sooner, so let's talk about some of those now, some emerging markets, with somebody who knows many of them very, very well, very intimately. Bill Rhodes joins us, delighted to say, of William Rhodes Global Advisors. And Bill, great to have you this Monday, June 8th.
It's great to be back with you, Vonnie. That's why I started with you. You were on radio before you went to TV.
Never really left, Bill, never really left. So, Bill, talk to us about the concerns you have for emerging markets, because obviously developed markets have needed several jolts, from fiscal jolts to monetary policy jolts, that emerging markets just may not have been able to do.
Well, I think this is the most serious emerging markets debt crisis I've seen in my lifetime, and I went through the Latin American debt crisis, the Asian financial crisis with the emerging markets, and this is by far the worst, because these countries have been hit harder by the pandemic than you might imagine. And over the last 10 years or so many of these countries have borrowed heavily in foreign currencies, mainly dollars, but also euros. And they built up, as I said, this tremendous debt, not only on the sovereign side, but very much so on the private sector side. And the question is, how are these economies going to be affected, particularly if we have a second round of COVID in the fall, which many people predict that we will have. And I am very concerned that the institutions involved in helping them out are not prepared for this. The IMF has applications, requests from over 100 countries to lend them money, and it's not clear that they have the resources to do so, because the U.S. has not been supporting an increase in capital with the SDRs. And then China is a major creditor now, which it was not in the last financial crisis. In fact, China was able to help bail us out 10 years ago, which they're not going to be able to do this time, particularly in the emerging markets.
So, Bill, as we think about some of the emerging markets and the area where you've had so much expertise in Latin America, it seems like a region of the world that's probably maybe one of the least prepared to deal with this from a health care perspective. How bad do you think it's going to get in Latin America?
Well, I think, Paul, there are a couple of countries that are being hit particularly hard. Brazil is, I think, the most serious one. And the cases in Brazil now are second only to the United States. They're reporting over 700,000 cases, and many people think that those are way understated. And you have a president, Bolsonaro, who's in denial and just wants to open up the country, and he's fighting with the head of a number of state governors about keeping on the lockdown. So I think the Brazilian economy, which is just getting out of a recession in the last 3 or 4 years, is now going to go back into a serious recession, and it could be the growth could be as low as negative 5% this year. I think you have a very serious situation in Venezuela, which just exacerbated the problems that you already had there. And then one of the surprises here has been how badly Peru has been hit by this, because Peru has had the best growth rate over the last decade, not only in Latin America, but in probably along with a few others in the emerging markets. And so I think the situation is, is really quite serious. And then you have all these debt restructurings going on. Argentina, in particular, is in the midst of a major default. It's ninth, trying to combat COVID and at the same time get a debt restructuring going.
Wait, Bill, I just want to ask you about Brazil a little further, because we're seeing protests break out in Brazil as well, in defense of democracy and also racism, anti-racism protests. I'm curious whether the intersection of COVID and Black Lives Matter protests across this country and others, whether that will oust certain leaders.
Well, I think in the case of Brazil, you've always had a racial problem, and something that you have to take into account very much in where they're going to be going. And so I think it is a problem, particularly in Brazil, which, as you know, has the largest number of Africans that were imported in slavery in the whole world, more so than the United States. Most people don't realize that. And certain areas are particularly, I think, affected in the north of Brazil. So I think Brazil is really in a very very difficult situation. And Brazil is important for the world because it's a country of almost 220 million people, one of the world's major providers of raw materials. And in the last economic crisis, China pumped somewhere in, as both of you know, $800 to $900 billion, you know, in infrastructure, among other things. And they were big importers of raw materials from the emerging world, and Brazil in particular, iron ore and other strategic goods, in the agricultural goods, soy, etc. It's not clear that that's going to happen this go around because the Chinese economy is growing much slower than people estimated.
Hey, Bill, you're going to stick around. That's the good news. We're going to have a couple more minutes with you to probe what's going on in the world of emerging markets. So Bill Rhodes, sticking with us, President and CEO of William Rhodes Global, former Citigroup chairman. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, two differing approaches to the protests sparked by George Floyd's death could be on display today. While President Trump holds a roundtable with law enforcement, Joe Biden will be in Houston meeting with the Floyd family before his public viewing this afternoon. Brown University political science chair Wendy Schiller tells Bloomberg Daybreak it remains to be seen whether it resonates with voters.
I mean, it's June, and things are just really, as difficult in this country as they've been for, in anybody's memory. And November, the interesting thing about a recent poll that came out was that the president still gets significantly higher marks on the potential to fix the economy.
Now, the Biden campaign says it will release new economic proposals in coming weeks. They argue the president's response to the coronavirus has made the economy worse. The Trump campaign's trying to pin activists' defund the police message on Biden. Republican Senator Mitt Romney was part of yesterday's march in Washington. He explained why to a Washington Post reporter.
and violence and brutality, and to make sure that people understand that Black Lives Matter.
This morning, President Trump retweeted that video with a message questioning Romney's sincerity. He's the first known Republican senator to take part in demonstrations. As the world passes 7 million coronavirus infections, New Zealand is lifting social distancing measures. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she is confident her country has stopped the spread.
We have tested almost 40,000 people for COVID-19 in the past 17 days, and none have tested positive. We have had no one in hospital for COVID-19 for 12 days.
control. So the question here is you have to get it under control and then open up in an orderly fashion. So I think then capital could eventually flow back. But right now, it's what they can do on restructuring their debt and getting support from international financial institutions. And very importantly, the private sector is deeper into debt than we've seen, as I said, in the last half century. And that's going to be even more difficult to deal with than the sovereign.
All right, Bill. So, back in the day in a Latin American debt crisis, the various countries would come to you at Citibank or the good folks at even, the old Chemical Bank or the Chase Manhattan Bank and say, listen, we need to kind of sit down and rework this. Now, the debt is not necessarily owned by big financial institutions per se in New York, the big banks, but by hedge funds and others. How can this play out in any timely fashion?
Well, I think that's a key question because when we did the restructurings at the time of the Latin American debt crisis, and even in the beginning of the Asian financial crisis, most of the indebtedness was the paper was held by banks. But since the Brady plan, it's been securitized, and as you say, it's hedge funds, money market funds, you name it, hold most of this paper. So it's not like getting 20, 30 banks around the table and cutting a deal. It's much more difficult to do. So this is why you need a more orderly process working with the IMF, the World Bank, and the Paris Club as soon as you can. And Africa particularly has a very difficult situation. And you have so many countries that are highly indebted there, and when you take a look at the outstanding, there's no way that they can pay back this debt anytime soon. So you need a major effort by the G20, which includes China, to put a program forth to help these countries regain market access. And the financial sector on the private sector side has got to be able to participate in this also.
Yeah, Bill, does it matter if the US doesn't recognize some of these institutions? I mean, right now that's not the case, but you just never know. And, I'm just looking at WCRS on the Bloomberg. The rand is down 17% versus the dollar year to date. The lira down 12.5%. The ruble down 10%. I mean, there's a serious deficit here.
Well, I think one of the problems is that when you take a look at the currency markets, although the dollar's been under attack recently, basically these countries borrowed in foreign currency, mostly in dollars, but also euros, and they're going to have a real difficult time in paying back, which exacerbates the situation even more. So what you have to do is to basically get the international financial institutions working with these bondholders and buy time so these countries can get over this pandemic and start, getting people back to work. It's a tough process, and I really think the most difficult economic problem that we will face getting the world back to growth is in the emerging markets. It's not in Europe. It's not in the United States or China. It's not in the developed world. It's in the developing world. And we've never seen anything quite like this since all the bond defaults of the emerging market countries in the Great Depression.
Bill, it is always great to get your perspective, particularly on topics like this. And it seems, unfortunately, like there is never any shortage. So, Bill, thanks for joining us today. That is William R. Rhodes of William R. Rhodes Global Advisors. And I'm just getting an email from one of our EM experts in-house, Paul Damien Sassauer, talking about how, right, it's good timing, talking about how actually it's shifting the sentiment across major EM ETFs seems to be getting better. Flows are accelerating sharply. So that's something, I suppose, some kind of a signal anyway.
Yeah,
to
because
investors.
back in March, it was just, nobody had any appetite for anything emerging market.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're looking forward to speaking with Damien Sassauer at some point as well this week. Do stay tuned. A lot more markets coming up, but this is Bloomberg.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing. so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Dear Dad, Happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carabas cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1969, MLB legend Mickey Mantle gives his farewell retirement speech during Mickey Mantle Day at Yankee Stadium.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Mayor Lindsay has proclaimed today, Sunday, June 8, 1969, Mickey Mantle Day in New York City.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Will technology lead us out of this crisis?
We don't know how many companies can accept people back on their roster.
The Fed seems to have really flexed its muscles.
There's still a coronavirus risk.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
To wring out that buy-the-dip mentality, that takes time. Are we looking at a more damaging break in the labor market? Does the shape of the yield curve matter? We're looking at late 2021, early 2022, where it really feels quote-unquote normal.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at the global oil markets. They're slipping a little bit today after Saudi Arabia says they will only cut production for 1 month. Plus, we're going to take a look at President Trump using the defund the police as a political weapon against Mr. Biden. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg, what do you have for us?
Stocks are up, Paul. Easing lockdowns bolstered economic optimism. Oil is down, however. The S&P is extending a rally from this year's low to more than 40%, is now on track to erase this year's losses. Let's take a look at the numbers, which have moved a little bit higher again. S&P 500 is up 0.4%, up 14. The Dow is up just about 1%, up 262. And the NASDAQ is up 0.2%, up 21. The 10-year is up 7/32 with a yield of 0.87%. West Texas Intermediate crude is still in the red, down 3.1% at 38.32 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.9% at 16.9820 an ounce. The dollar yen 108.62, the euro $1.13 even, and the British pound $1.26.97. The UK is pressing ahead with a 2-week quarantine on international arrivals. Move British Airways and others say will wipe out tourism over the crucial summer season and destroy any chance of a quick recovery from the pandemic-induced slump. BA, along with EasyJet and Ryanair, have threatened to sue the government over the policy, which took effect today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
All right, Greg Jarrett, thank you for that wrap. Much appreciated. Let's get now to our daily small caps report. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson joins us. So, Dave, what small caps are you looking at?
Well, I'll tell you, we can start by looking with small caps as a group, Vonnie, and they're doing a whole lot better than larger companies in today's trading. The Russell 2000 index up 1.6%, and the S&P 500 is only higher by 0.4%. Energy stocks have some of the Russell's biggest gains after OPEC and other oil producers extended output cuts. Extraction Oil and Gas, whose ticker is XOG, is up 124%. Oil driller Noble Corp, ticker NE, is up 103%. Both stocks trading for less than $1. Nonetheless, at the forefront of the Russell's gains. Innocean Biosciences, ticker ENOB, is up 92.5%. The drug developer met with U.S. regulators on a proposed treatment for HIV. Innocean said the meeting was, quote, very successful. Ideanomics, ticker IDEX, has risen 36%. The electric vehicle supplier said it began delivering taxis to the Chinese city of Guilin under a contract signed last November. Now, one of the steepest declines in the Russell belongs to Ascena Retail Group, ticker ASNA. The owner of women's apparel retailer Ann Taylor is down 17.5%. People with knowledge of the matter said Ascena may file for bankruptcy as soon as next month. And Emergent Biosolutions, ticker EBS, is down 19%. The company lost a patent case Friday that was brought by Teva Pharmaceutical over Narcan spray used to treat opioid overdoses.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Looking at oil today, trading off here after a nice run over the last several weeks. And I think what we saw over the last several weeks is a sense that maybe demand may not be as constricted as initially thought when we first entered the pandemic. That's number one. And then number two, tightening up of supply as OPEC Plus sought to cut production by a couple million barrels a day. And Julian Lee joins us here. He's an oil strategist for Bloomberg News. Julian, looking at oil today, I got Brent crude down about 2.8%. I guess Saudi Arabia is not going to extend their production cuts. Is that kind of the driver today?
I think there's a couple of things that have driven it, Paul. I think certainly the OPEC meeting, I think, was pretty well priced in last week. The producers agreed that they would extend their deep cuts, their full 9.7 million barrels a day of cuts for another month into July. But what the Saudis said, and they made that clearer in the press conference they held earlier today, was that an additional 1.2 million barrels a day of voluntary cuts that are being made by Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait in June, those won't be extended for another month. And I think part of the sell-off is related to that. There was not a great deal of clarity on that over the weekend and in the run-up to the meeting. I think the second thing that's happened is Goldman Sachs came out with a note earlier today striking a somewhat more bearish tone than they have recently, partly based around the fact that supply seems to be picking up a bit quicker than demand. Refinery economics are under pressure. And then a little later today, we've had this announcement out of Libya that they have revoked the force majeure on exports from their largest oil field following the ceasefire talks that have been going on. And that lays the groundwork for what I think will be a gradual recovery of up to 1 million barrels a day of Libyan output over the coming months.
Yeah, that's not nothing. Julian, you got to love the oil market. I mean, 2 weeks ago, Russia basically said that it wasn't going to continue on cuts that it had engaged in for a certain amount of time, and the market was disappointed. This week, it's Saudi, but these deals were made. There is no reason for Saudi to continue a cut that it made, on the understanding that it would come to an end. So why does the oil market pout on these each time?
Well, I think that in all the talk that we saw last week in the run-up to the OPEC meeting, there was talk of extending the deepest cuts, talk of extending the June cuts into July, and I think people got a bit ahead of themselves and perhaps took the view that would be both the 9.7 that was agreed as part of this big deal that was stuck in April, plus the 1.2 that Saudi Arabia
and others announced subsequently. And I think it was perhaps a little bit of over-enthusiasm, and people took the most bullish interpretation of what were, at the time, perhaps some fairly vague comments, and that's starting to be unpicked a little bit now. But I think this is, to some extent, a classic sort of buy the rumor, sell the meeting approach to these OPEC plus gatherings that's gone on for some time now.
Julian, let's go across the Atlantic here. What's going on with the American producers? Where's production there?
Well, we are certainly seeing suggestions that some of the wells that were shut in during the depth of the pandemic are starting to be reopened again. There was a note out by Citigroup late last week that sort of suggested that at a price of $35 to $40 a barrel, we might start to see some of the fracking crews get back to work in the Permian Basin, and that with prices of WTI above 40, we could even start to see some of the drilling crews get back into action. I don't think we're quite seeing that yet, but what we do seem to be seeing is that some of the wells that had been producing and were shut in are starting to be reactivated again. Whether that's enough yet to offset the declines in older wells, I'm not quite convinced. We are still seeing the headline production numbers from the weekly EIA data show further declines in U.S. output, although that's moderating somewhat.
Julian Lee, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate that. Julian Lee, oil strategist for Bloomberg News, joining us on the phone. It's interesting when we talk about oil, it's supply, it's demand. How's your supply and demand kind of balancing out here? And I think it's generally been perceived that demand may come back a little bit faster than initially thought. So now it's a question of kind of managing the supply side. And we've got OPEC and OPEC Plus trying to do that, as well as U.S. producers. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines to Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have?
Well, Paul, the uproar over George Floyd's death at the hands of Minneapolis police has led to a shift in the national conversation from Black Lives Matter to defund the police. The Minneapolis City Council took a big step in that direction over the weekend with a veto-proof majority announcing they intend to dismantle their city's police department. City Council President Lisa Bender.
Our reform efforts have failed, and we have done many attempts at reform and new leadership in the department and many things, and we still see this tragic death.
The council member's plan is still unclear. Republican Senator Ted Cruz responded on Twitter calling it insane, saying it would mean many more black lives lost. Right now, congressional Democrats are introducing a sweeping series of police reform measures. The push is being led by the Congressional Black Caucus. Chairwoman Karen Bass says the Justice in Policing Act has more than 200 co-sponsors. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says nothing less than a transformative change in policing is needed. Ahead of this, Democrats held an 8-minute, 46-second moment of silence in honor of George Floyd. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Every American should try to stand in silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to acknowledge the pain of George Floyd and the pain of racism.
This afternoon, President Trump holds a law enforcement roundtable at the White House. Joe Biden is in Houston meeting with George Floyd's family. Plans to include a video message at his funeral today. A 6-hour public viewing is set for this afternoon in George Floyd's Texas hometown. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer.
That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
COVID-19. On days when it seems there are nothing but questions.
What about the pandemic emergency purchase program in Europe?
What's the medical side of this?
We try to ask good ones.
How long until we have an answer on what drugs can help us fight this pandemic?
How do you think this has the potential to rattle markets?
Does that mean we should shut down?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
It's a rather controversial question being asked.
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
At Wix, we put customer safety at the heart of everything we do. But right now, that doesn't just mean goggles, steel toe caps and yellow helmets. It means 2-meter distances, paying by card, and safety screens at checkout. So whether you want to shop with us in-store, click and collect, or have your order delivered to your home, let's do it right safely. Wix.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carrabis cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up and do Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick 6 podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards, that's how you wind up.
Search Pick 6 on TuneIn to listen.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are higher, extending gains now across all three major indices. Investors are continuing to assess the economic recovery, and apparently they like their assessment. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is up 0.6%, up 18. The Dow's up 1.1%, up 301. The NASDAQ is also up now, up 0.3%, up 30. The 10-year is up 6/32 with a yield of 0.87%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 3.5% at 38.15 a barrel, while COMEX gold is up 0.7% at 16.9420 an ounce. The dollar yen 108.65. The euro is $1.1305, and the British pound $1.2697. Tesla rallies above its record closing high after data showing sales in China rebounded in the month of May. Car sales in China rose last month for the first time in almost a year, and Teslas were the top-selling new energy vehicle with more than 11,000 units sold. Let me see if I can bring up Tesla here. It is currently up 4.4% at $924.50 a share. Well, that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Vonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
And welcome back to Bloomberg Markets. So let's get to something that's happening as we speak. House and Senate Democrats proposing a sweeping police reform bill today, hoping to turn energy from growing nationwide protests, it would seem, and police misconduct to ensure that some laws are perhaps changed, or at least they're being considered in the next several weeks. Let's bring in Jordan Fabian, White House correspondent. So, Jordan, what is the strategy here? Were lawmakers embarrassed into this? Were they planning this anyway? Why now?
Well, some on the Democratic side have long wanted these kind of police reforms, and these protests surrounding the police killing of George Floyd have given them a political opening. You know, polls are showing that Americans, the majorities of Americans, are dissatisfied with how the police handled this incident. So they're proposing measures they think would address the problem. The bill here would ban chokeholds, no-knock warrants, the type of things that have in the past led to these police-related deaths of black men and women.
So, Jordan, so this is coming out of the House. Is there bipartisan support here, or is this going to be a very much kind of left-right type of discussion?
Yeah, right now, I think it's turning into the kind of left-right discussion we've become accustomed to with some of these big major issues facing the country. House and Senate Democrats have introduced it, but we haven't seen Republican support for this bill yet. I guess that could change, but we haven't heard any Republicans sort of voice their support for this. So, and then you have President Trump, of course, basically accusing Vice President Biden and other Democrats of wanting to defund the police. Even though the vice president doesn't support that position himself.
Yeah, I mean, this is an extraordinarily interesting dynamic, right? The president trying to impose a position on Joe Biden, which he really hasn't espoused up to now, at least. What happens next in the Biden camp? I mean, if it's a bit of a catch-22, if he comes out and says, I'm not for this, then he's just inviting criticism too, isn't he, Jordan?
That's right. I mean, does appear to be a groundswell support for this among civil rights activists, people of color, people who make up the Democratic base. So at a certain point, the vice president may face pressure to support this position, and that's the type of pressure that the president is seeking to exploit, while also trying to appeal to voters who are not happy with what they're seeing on television with the protests, and also law enforcement groups who have been supportive of Democrat Joe Biden in the past, but have expressed some concern about where he's going on issues of criminal justice.
Jordan, there's been some commentary that the protests over George Floyd's death have really put Trump on the defensive here. How's the thinking within the Beltway about how the president and the administration has kind of been handling this very difficult issue?
Yeah, I couldn't point to many people outside the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue who think he's handled it particularly well. The photo op, quote unquote, at the St. John's Church across the street from the White House was widely panned, and the president really hasn't even really paid too much lip service to addressing the underlying grievance of these protesters, which is systematic racism, problems with policing that have been apparent for decades. And until he does that, I think you're going to see these protests continue.
Yeah, and I mean, the other question is police unions and where they end up and how much the president supports those or withholds support from those, and the dynamics between the unions and management at police headquarters as well, Jordan.
That's right. And you heard one police union leader come out last week and criticize Joe Biden for voicing support for police reform. And I think that's the kind of thing the president is trying to exploit and take advantage of. Something he talked about a lot in 2016 was that union leaders are supportive of Democrats, but really the rank and file support me. And you can see him trying to duplicate that strategy this time around with police unions.
It's interesting. I mean, defunding is such a... I'm not sure that's even the most appropriate term here. I'm not sure reformers are looking to defund the police, but simply to reform them in some of the practices and maybe how they deal with minority communities. How are the Democrats... How can they frame this differently, do you think?
Yeah, the defund the police really has a stark tone, but as you mentioned, the people who support this call really do support a variety of things, including police reform, but also cutting police budgets and redirecting some of that money toward social programs and things that would address the social ills that plaguing communities of color. So Democrats I think have a challenge here because that slogan has kind of stuck. Got painted on the street in Washington D.C. next to the Black Lives Matter slogan. So as far as coming up with a catchy slogan, they're behind the eight ball. But I think that this bill they introduced today is a part of that strategy to try to harness this energy and define what exact policy proposals are going to be behind that.
Jordan, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. I'm sure we're going to be chatting more about this going forward with you. Bloomberg's News, Jordan Fabian, he's the White House correspondent joining us on the phone. And it's really interesting, Vonnie, how this is going to play out because this feels different. This unrest really feels different than what we've seen over past police issues as it relates to minorities.
Not just that, but after the first couple of days, it seems to have settled down now to something extraordinarily organized in all 5 boroughs of New York City and, in cities and states across the country and abroad. I mean, we've seen, protests in Germany. We've seen them in Britain. We saw the toppling of a statue in Britain yesterday. This is taking on international significance, and I imagine will continue for some time if the organisers have anything to do with it, Paul.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So we will certainly pay attention to that. Right now, we have green on the screen. Equity markets trading higher on this Monday session. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are jumping, with the Dow gaining almost 300 points. Investors spent the weekend digesting that extraordinary payrolls report, which showed a gain of 2.5 million jobs for the month of May. A new week brings new challenges. The Federal Reserve meets this week, and investors will closely be looking for any hints of further stimulus. Bank branch traffic fell more than 30% in April and the first 3 weeks of May compared with the same period last year. That's according to financial research firm Navantis. Dow Jones said this has banks, including U.S. Bancorp, considering consolidating branches. And auto demand is coming back faster than expected and quickly clearing trucks from dealer lots, pushing Ford to crank up production of its highly profitable F-150 pickup truck this week. The ramp-up has some workers on edge despite the extra money that they stand to earn from the overtime and extra Saturday shifts Ford is adding to its Dearborn factory. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. With COVID-19, so much is unknown.
At Wix, we put customer safety at the heart of everything we do. But right now, that doesn't just mean goggles, steel toe caps, and yellow helmets. It means 2-meter distances, paying by card, and safety screens at checkouts. So whether you want to shop with us in-store, click and collect, or have your order delivered to your home, let's do it right safely. Wix.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability, mobile data charges may apply.
At Lloyds Bank, we know that money is a concern for a lot of people during this time.
I'm really worried about the business. I'm worrying about you. And I think that's changing me, and I'm worried that somewhere along the line you might not love me anymore.
Oh, that's not true. Whatever's playing on your mind at the moment, Lloyds Bank, in partnership with Mental Health UK, can offer you support and advice. Visit lloydsbank.com/mentalhealth.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Are you ready for the realist first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man? What's up, my brother? Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1969, MLB legend Mickey Mantle gives his farewell retirement speech during Mickey Mantle Day at Yankee Stadium.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Mayor Lindsay has proclaimed today, Sunday, June 8, 1969, Mickey Mantle Day in New York City.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we are going to focus on healthcare. First, we're going to take a look at potentially getting a vaccine. When and how can we expect a vaccine? We'll deal with that. Plus, we're going to take a look at the potential for a big M&A trade in the healthcare space. AstraZeneca mulling a bid for Gilead. We'll have the details on that. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Stocks are up, Paul. The dollar is falling and easing lockdowns bolstered economic optimism. The S&P is extending a rally from this year's low to more than 40% and is on track to erase its 2020 losses. Energy companies are surging, with Noble Energy and Marathon jumping at least 9.5%. We take a look at the markets every 15 minutes. The S&P 500 is up 0.5%, up 17. The Dow is up 1.1%, up 291. And the Nasdaq's up 0.3%, up 32. The 10-year is up 7/32. The yield is 0.87%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 3% now at 38.36 a barrel, while COMEX gold is up 0.75% at 16.9520 an ounce. The dollar yen 108.61. The euro's $1.1293, and the British pound $1.2686. New York City's hotel tax is projected to fall to $37.6 million in the quarter ending June 30th, a decline of almost 80% from the last 3 months of 2019 as a result of the pandemic. This according to the city controller. Now that is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
And welcome to Bloomberg Markets, as the man said. So let's get to our next conversation now with virologist from Harvard University, Dr. Peter Kulczynski. Actually, extremely excited to speak with you. You're the author of The Great American Drug Deal, a new prescription for innovative and affordable medicines. So, Dr. Kulczynski, will it be the great American drug that provides us with our vaccinations, or will it be the great Chinese drug?
Thank you very much for having me on the show. I should point out, I am a scientist by training. I did my virology training at Harvard, but for my whole career, I've been a biotechnology investor, a venture capitalist. So I look at this industry from the standpoint of an investor evaluating a lot of different companies. And I think that while China has been a larger player in the drug development industry over the last 10, 15 years, I think that the COVID response globally has been somewhat nationalistic, and my guess is that China is going to conserve its vaccine doses for its own people, and Europe is looking to lock down doses, and so the U.S. Is going to be getting doses from companies that it's contracted with.
So, Peter, I mean, some people have been talking about, whoever gets it first maybe should just license it to everybody else for the common good. Is that something you think could happen here, or is this something that maybe some of these companies are going to look to profit off of?
If only it worked that way. But, getting there first, it's not like writing a book and being able to just hit publish and then there's infinite downloads. You can get there first, and then you have to actually scale up manufacturing. And so the first vaccines that are likely to prove out maybe later this fall, they're still going to be constrained by the fact that, companies are going to be scaling up manufacturing and maybe getting to the point of tens of millions of doses. If we get to 100 million doses by the end of this year collectively across a few vaccines, that'll be amazing. But that's not enough to vaccinate, even the U.S., let alone U.S. and Europe and, all the other countries that are out there.
So as an investor who is very familiar with how these drugs are developed and these vaccines are developed, where have you been investing, Dr. Kulczynski?
You can call me Peter. We don't talk about where we specifically have been invested. We're a regulated entity, but people can look up our public filings. But we've been certainly looking to support companies that are working on a range of products, from vaccines to small molecule drugs. Like, wouldn't it be great to have an oral version of remdesivir so that a person can just show up at the hospital, be diagnosed, be sent home with a prescription, and not have to stay in the hospital getting IV infusions?
So, Peter, what do you make of the Bloomberg News has been reporting over the last day or so about a potential deal between AstraZeneca and Gilead? Is that something that you think, if there is some talks going on, would that be something driven by the coronavirus, maybe a need to get scale in production, or what do you make of that potential?
I think it's totally unrelated. You got a $140 billion market cap company, a 90-something billion market cap company. Their valuations are not tied to anything to do with coronavirus. These are, if these discussions are even real, they're related to other things, more like oncology, probably.
On that, the scaling problem, I mean, obviously, almost any company, probably every company that does come up with a vaccine will have this problem. It would seem to me like that might be the profit center. So if you're an investor looking at various areas, do you avoid, the drug companies that are engaging in research and development, and you just go straight for the smaller companies potentially that will provide the ability to these winners to scale?
Well, they're quite sizable companies that are enabling others to scale. And I think right now you're absolutely right. It's actually unclear where the profits are going to be in the drugs and vaccines. There are some well-meaning people who say that all these products should just be given away at cost. I think that's probably a terrible way to inspire the private sector to, risk capital to, help save the world. I think that it makes sense for there to be some reward for that. But we already have a mechanism for that. We've got BARDA, for example, a government agency giving out massive contracts to companies that have promising vaccines in order to help them scale up their manufacturing even before they've proven that their vaccine works, funding manufacturing at risk, as they say, and in exchange, securing doses for Americans. And so BARDA's given funding now to J&J and Novavax and Moderna and, companies that are taking all kinds of different approaches in order to hedge our bets.
Peter, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your thoughts and insight. Dr. Peter Kolchinsky, Managing Director of RA Capital Management based in Boston, also the author of the book entitled The Great American Drug Deal, a new prescription for innovation and affordable medicines. And Vani, I think, Peter hit on one of the big issues here. It's let's assume that somebody comes up with a vaccine. Certainly people are working on it, but how do you scale manufacturing and scale distribution?
Exactly. And you definitely have seen some small deals. And I acknowledge you said that, obviously it's the bigger companies that can help companies scale better, but you have seen small deals go down with some of the companies that are looking to manufacture vaccines buying, other manufacturers so that they could potentially scale up quickly. But it will be interesting to see because, it isn't clear that these vaccines, if they do indeed emerge, will make money for their companies.
Yeah.
And if they do, it'll be a long time.
It will be. And then obviously the question everybody wants answered right now is when? When will vaccines be ready so that we can presumably get back to a more normal life, if you will? So that's the big issue for Big Pharma. Right now, let's head down to our Washington, D.C. studios for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, 2 weeks to the day, a white Minneapolis police officer put a knee to George Floyd's neck. That officer, Derek Chauvin, is in court to face murder and manslaughter charges. Mourners are gathering in Floyd's hometown of Houston for a 6-hour public viewing of his casket, and congressional Democrats are introducing a sweeping series of police reform measures. Congressional Black Caucus Chair Karen Bass.
The world is witnessing the birth of a new movement in our country. This movement has now spread to many nations around the world, with thousands marching to register their horror at hearing the cry, "I can't breathe."
That movement is also leading to calls in some quarters to defund police. President Trump is trying to pin that slogan on Joe Biden. The former vice president hasn't embraced it himself, but Brown University political science chair Wendy Schiller tells Bloomberg Daybreak it could be a weak spot for Democrats.
Revamping, reforming, re-envisioning how we are policed in America, I think people could really say, okay, let's talk about that. That's a conversation we have to have. But when it's defund, I think that puts the Democrats at a disadvantage in a lot of parts of the country.
Now, Democrats hope to make the economy a weak spot for President Trump, countering his claims it's back on track by focusing on lingering pain from the coronavirus and deep-seated inequities. Another sign that we're not quite out of the coronavirus woods just yet. A dozen new cases in the Philadelphia area have been traced to somebody who went to beach house gatherings at the Jersey Shore. Bucks County Health Director David Damsker says it's an important reminder not to let your guard down at the beach. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Oculomotor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability, mobile data charges may apply.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carabas cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1969, MLB legend Mickey Mantle gives his farewell retirement speech during Mickey Mantle Day at Yankee Stadium.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Mayor Lindsay has proclaimed today, Sunday, June 8, 1969, Mickey Mantle Day in New York City.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks rally on hopes of the economy reopening. Shares of airlines, retailers, cruise liners, and other companies tied to the reopening of the economy are leading the market higher. Energy stocks also got a boost after the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries struck a deal over the weekend to extend production cuts through July. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is up 0.5%, up 14. Dow is up 0.9%, up 255. And the NASDAQ is up 0.2%, up 21. The 10-year is up 6/32 with a yield of 0.87%. West Texas Intermediate crude's down 3.4% at 38.20 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.75% at 16.9550 an ounce. The dollar yen 108.50. The euro $1.13 even, and the British pound $1.26.93. Bitcoin fans have been disheartened by its recent rally, or rather heartened by its recent rally, but a technical indicator points to a potential slump ahead. Based on the DVAN buying and selling pressure indicator, which depicts bull-bear trends, Bitcoin fell below the trend line for the first time since May, suggesting the coin may be forming a new selling pattern. Bitcoin is down 0.2% at 96.95 per. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, over the last 24 hours, Bloomberg News has been reporting about potential talks between AstraZeneca and Gilead, two huge pharmaceutical companies, maybe getting together in what would be another healthcare M&A trade. To dig a little bit deeper into that story, we welcome Max Neeson, biotech, pharma, and healthcare columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, as well as Chris Hughes. Chris Hughes, he's a deals columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with you, Chris. Just get a sense of, is this a deal that makes sense strategically, or is this more of a financially driven deal should something occur?
Yeah, it's not obvious it makes a lot of strategic sense for AstraZeneca in the sort of conventional way you think about deals. But both companies have got quite different emphases in terms of the medicines they make, and also AstraZeneca has got a really enviable pipeline of drugs already. It's got one of the most attractive drug pipelines in the industry. You know, it's questionable why it would want to do a deal that might actually dilute the quality of that pipeline of upcoming drugs. But as you say, from a financial perspective, it starts to look more interesting. AstraZeneca's had a really good run on its share price lately, and that gives it a good, strong currency to pay for a deal like this. And actually, even though it's got a strong share price and an attractive pipeline of drugs, AstraZeneca's cash generation at this point in time actually isn't that great. Now, contrast that with Gilead. Gilead's actually got pretty good cash generation. So if you put the two together, you actually have a business which financially has a much more solid profile.
Max, would either of the companies have been looking to team up, and is there a chance that this might turn hostile at some point?
I would be a little bit surprised about that. Well, the likelihood of this actually happening still seems relatively slim to me. Gilead, in its own right, has had something of a pump up to its valuation based on its work from Desivir, it might want to capitalize on that by getting a return by solidifying that increase. The fact that the currency would be so heavily made up of AstraZeneca shares is something that would make them quite resistant. And given the fact that both companies are separately working on different pharmaceutical efforts against the pandemic, I think they might want to avoid making this into a hostile fight.
Yeah, Max, just following up on that, is there the timing seems odd, obviously, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic here. Is any of this deal, centered around the science of somebody's got a drug, or maybe if we put a couple of drugs together between these two companies, or if we put our resources behind, is anything driven by the COVID vaccine potential or treatment potential?
I don't think that's the case, because these are two very different approaches. You have Gilead's, which is a treatment, something for acutely ill people, and then AstraZeneca working on a vaccine, a prophylactic. Scientifically and from a manufacturing perspective, two kind of entirely different things, and one where there's not really likely to be an additive effect. If anything, trying to complete what would be a very large and complicated transaction might actually distract from those efforts.
If Gilead says no thanks, and let's be clear, we're hearing that, there's absolutely not going to be a deal, of course, and you always hear these kinds of rumours around deals, so everything needs to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. But if Gilead says absolutely no, we do not want to partner with a larger company at the moment, is there another company that AstraZeneca might be interested in, Chris?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the very fact that AstraZeneca is sort of knocking on doors, even though it has this ostensibly strong pipeline, does raise questions about kind of how it sees its future at the moment, on a standalone basis. It has got this strong share price, which does provide this takeover currency if it could dissuade another company to accept that. But the real question is kind of why would it want to dilute that, other than finding another company, I guess, which has a similar sort of cash generating profile to Gilead, and also is sort of in the zone to do a deal, and also is willing to take on the risk of a difficult integration, and negotiate it in a very difficult environment. It's quite hard to, that list of potential candidates is probably not very high. It's a very hard environment to do deals in.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to go, Chris. It seems like this is a really odd time to do a deal, again, in the middle of a pandemic, but I'm looking at the share prices, and neither company's moving that much. Does that kind of suggest to you, as a deals reporter, that the odds of this really being in the works are pretty low?
Well, AstraZeneca was sort of down a bit at the open in Europe this morning, which suggested that investors were a bit concerned about possibly the company doing something that would take it in a different direction and would involve a lot of stock issuance. I think Gilead was called up too. I haven't seen where it is at the moment, but investors are they are taking seriously the possibility that something could happen. Now, as you say, this is a strange moment to be doing something like this. Any deal that involves combining your company with another one or selling it, that's a critical moment in your career history as a CEO, and it's it involves delicate negotiations. It's quite hard to do all that over Zoom or some other video conference. It's a tricky one, and also doing all the due diligence. So I think it's one thing to have the idea and make the approach, but to actually nail down a deal and virtually shake hands on it, it is difficult. Now, the question is, what happens if the pandemic hopefully eases and conditions for actually having face-to-face talks and doing more substantial due diligence become much easier? Then at that point, does this become much more real?
All right, well, we will continue to watch this space with acute interest, and our thanks to both of you. That is Chris Hughes and Max Neeson, both internally here at Bloomberg, reporting on pharma, and of course Max has been doing a phenomenal job throughout the pandemic as well, just on the virology and everything else. Paul,
how was your first day, Vonnie, on Bloomberg Markets?
Oh my gosh, it felt like I had never jumped off the bicycle in the first place.
Exactly, it's great to have you on board.
Well, do join us tomorrow of another full slate, and looking forward to being back in the chair from Paul Sweeney and myself, Bonnie Quinn, and everybody else here. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. At the start of every day, you can't predict exactly how it'll end.
How much has demand ramped up for it?
Better information helps.
This is largely about survival in many ways.
Bloomberg Business Week, weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio.
With the Bloomberg Small Business Report, I'm John Tucker, brought to you by Dell Small Business. Across the country, there are small businesses pivoting and adapting to the pandemic-related shutdowns. Chatham, New Jersey-based Boxcar adapted its parking commuting app to become a grocery pickup app. Joe Colangelo is the company head.
We drop your groceries in your trunk and you drive away. And we did about 6,000 pounds of that in our first week.
Baltimore-based Words with Boards owner Kim Strasner moved from custom cutting boards and joined up with other businesses to make PPEs.
We are making cotton masks. So we're using our laser engraver to cut the fabric.
Interior designer Marcy Sagal at MSA Interiors learned from the last recession to branch out.
We have quite a bit of projects, actually, with the University of Maryland system, working on one of their hospitals.
These small business owners show you don't have to limit yourself or your small business. And that is the Bloomberg Small Business Report.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year-end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
We have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. Let's check in on those markets where, once again, they're on their way north today. Abigail Doolittle is here. And once again, also, Abigail, I see the NASDAQ is lagging behind this continued rotation in cyclicals. What does that tell us?
Well, it's interesting that the NASDAQ is lagging, because as it lags on that cyclical rotation, which I'll address in just one moment, David, it has actually put in an all-time high. So we're having a really interesting market environment here. But relative to that cyclical rally rotation, that really is the main theme that we've been looking at, not just today, but over the last couple of weeks, as investors move into the strong economy and recovery sectors, such as the industrials, energy, the financial subsectors would include airlines and other travel-related sectors. sectors, subsectors, autos. It comes, though, at the price, and that is the reason that you have the Dow there outperforming the S&P 500. It comes, though, at the price of some of those other sectors, such as tech and healthcare, those stay-at-home sectors that have turned into the new defense. Calling into question today's rally, though, David, we have some of the haven assets rallying in a very significant way. Dollar-yen down by more than 1%. We have some of the 10-year yield reversing a 6-day. It had been a 6-day backup. Now 10-year yield is trading lower. That tells you that there's a move into bonds. So when you start to see haven assets rally, even as stocks are, especially on the back of a strong move up for stocks, you wonder what are traders looking at? Are they just treading water, waiting to see how all of this resolves? Or is it a tell on something that's about to flare up, such as U.S.-China relations, not liking that cyclical rally, that maybe it's gone too far, too fast, or even perhaps some questioning around that payrolls report on Friday, David?
So, as you say, I've got a lot of indicators pointing in somewhat different directions. What about that yield curve? There was a lot of reporting over the week about the yield curve that's really steepened quite a bit. Where is it today, and what does that tell us about what's coming down the road?
So the last time I looked, the yield curve was steepening, and let me just take a quick look. It's actually now it's come in, so it's no longer steepening. Well, when you have a steeper yield curve, it's more normalized. If you recall last August, September, it inverted briefly. That typically precedes a recession. I don't think anybody would have thought that little bit of inversion last year was a tell on what's happened this year, but lo and behold, we are in a recession. So you want that yield curve to steepen and normalize. Going into the Fed today, it's going to be, or on Wednesday, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they talk about yield curve control. Probably pretty unlikely. That Fed meeting may be more just a cruise control meeting where they don't have to do all that much, and it's for the future to make big changes, considering how much has been done for them with that yield curve steepening over the last couple of weeks and the move lower for bonds, plus some of that economic data coming in a bit stronger. That's going to be an interesting meeting indeed. So to your point, the yield curve had been steepening, right now taking a little bit of a breather, and that has to do with the fact that we do right now have this rally for bonds. And this week, David, it's worth noting, a ton of supply coming. It will be interesting to see whether or not billions and billions of dollars worth of bonds will be absorbed in this current environment.
Okay, Abigail, thank you so much for that report on the markets. Well, markets got a nice surprise on Friday from those jobs numbers that really pretty much shocked everyone. And that means this week we're going to be looking at any economic data that come out to see, do they tend to support what we saw in the jobs numbers? To take us through that, we welcome now our colleague Michael McKee. He is Bloomberg Chief Economic and Policy Correspondent. So what are you looking at this week, Mike? Will it give us any indication whether the jobs numbers are really indicating something larger about a rally?
Well, it's kind of hard to tell because the data that we have don't do a lot. I haven't got a lot of numbers on the labor market. We do get initial jobless claims, and analysts are still expecting 1.5 million claims. So that is kind of hard to square with what we saw on Friday. We normally have a lot of churn in the labor market, but that's an extraordinary amount. So we'll have to see what we make of that. This is really a week of price indicators, the CPI in particular. If we're in a deep recession, we should see prices low or falling. Last month, the CPI fell by 0.8. This month, we're expecting a flat number, but it leaves the year-over-year inflation rate at just 0.3%. And that would definitely say, okay, we're in recession. Then the question is for Wednesday, when the Fed's meeting, what do they think of inflation? Do they think it's going to start rising again? So it's kind of hard to tell. We may not get a lot of ratification of where we're going, just more indications of where we are.
So jump to that Fed meeting where we'll get a result on Wednesday. You've covered the Fed for a good number of years. Did the jobs numbers on Friday make the Fed's job easier this Wednesday?
In a sense, yes. They're not expected to do anything, and so there's no pressure on them because obviously the jobs numbers are better. The question that then becomes, does that continue? And the Fed, being all professional economists, is going to say, we never look at just 1 month to see if it's a trend. So they'll definitely want some sort of additional information to decide whether they're going to be changing policy going forward. Probably not anytime soon. The whole question of yield curve control can probably wait. We'll be interested to see what the minutes say and what kind of discussion they have, because if you're going to do yield curve control, it's also a question of where on the curve you do it and what interest rate you set. If you're going to be at the long end, what should the 10-year rate be under these circumstances? We know that they want 0 for the short end. So where do they go with the long end? Those will be questions that may be answered in the minutes, but we probably won't get a whole lot out of the Fed on that. We'll be sure to ask Jay Powell at his news conference. The most interesting thing from the Fed is going to be their economic projections. They're doing them for the first time since January, since they decided there was no point in March. So we'll see where they think the economy is going. We'll get the dot plot, which will probably be completely flat for the next 2 years. They'll have no indication of rate increases. And it'll be interesting to see if they have scrambled to redo their unemployment forecasts after this last week's jobs report.
One more, Mike. Have they gotten that Main Street lending program going? Every time we hear from Chair Powell, he says, it's just a matter of a couple of days from now. Have they got it going finally?
Not yet. So we're going to have to wait and see what's going on with that and why they haven't been able to. It's been promised on a regular basis. And so we need to ask Jay Powell about that. And I would imagine he would be telling us pretty much the same thing, that it's going to come anytime. But we just don't know when it's going to start. We all thought it would have started by the time they started their meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, I think you called it the Waiting for Godot lending facility at one point, Mike.
Exactly.
Thank you so much to Michael McKee. He's our Chief Economic and Policy Correspondent. Coming up, House Democrats are unveiling right now up on Capitol Hill a sweeping proposal for policing reform. We're going to talk with Professor Imani Cheers of GW University about what they're talking about and whether it makes sense. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
It's the people with...
We're Cadent. Keeping you and our people safe is our main focus, and our vital work must continue. You'll start to see more of us in your area as we increase our work to upgrade the gas pipes to keep the energy flowing into your homes and businesses. We may need to come into your home to complete this work, but rest assured our engineers are following all government guidance on PPE and social distancing. We continue to provide the critical gas emergency service, and if you smell gas, call 0800 111 999. To all other key workers, we would like to say a big thank you from everyone at Cadent. Cadent, your gas network.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment. Feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work-from-home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Thanks to National Lottery players, South Denbighshire Community Partnership are now delivering hot meals to elderly people in the community like Bob and Sarah.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1969, MLB legend Mickey Mantle gives his farewell retirement speech during Mickey Mantle Day at Yankee Stadium.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Mayor Lindsay has proclaimed today, Sunday, June 8, 1969, Mickey Mantle Day in New York City.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn. Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, pass to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Years, and yet things don't seem to get fixed. Is there something different about this time that gives you some hope that maybe some changes really will be made?
Absolutely. I am incredibly optimistic. And for someone 40 years, born in the United States, raised in apartheid South Africa, I have seen the way in which protesting, rebellion, which is what we've seen, not only in the United States, not only in Washington, D.C., where I currently am, but across the globe. We are seeing that a tide is coming. A tide is coming. We're realizing that the majority of these marches and these protests have been incredibly multi and international and interracial, which I think is really important to note.
So this is a problem that has been with us something like for 400 years, and it is multifaceted.
Absolutely.
It's not just one thing that we can do. Let's take the thing that seems to be coming up first, and that is proposed reform of the policing function. And now we have House Democrats right now proposing something new on Capitol Hill. What do you understand about what they're trying to do with things like a national registry, putting a ban on chokeholds, various things like that? And do you think that will help at least one part of the problem?
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing last week, actually, the organization called Campaign Zero released a set of very tangible and actionable items immediately. It's called 8 Can't Wait. And a number of those policies we're seeing and those suggestions we're seeing being implemented into this bill right now. And you're correct. The number one thing we saw within 10 days of sustained protests that Minneapolis in particular, which is where at the moment a number of these issues as a result of the murder of George Floyd, but they banned the use of chokeholds. We've seen that charges have been brought against the officers. We're seeing that in Oakland, for example, mayor has agreed to adopt a zero-tolerance policy on racism in their police department. We're seeing it across the country, and that's why I believe that we're seeing this bill being discussed today.
At the same time, there are broader issues here as well, as I say. It certainly includes the police. It goes well beyond the police. It does strike me that it may be particularly powerful right now because the COVID-19 virus so disproportionately affects people of color, African Americans and Hispanics, by the way, Native Americans as well, compared to the white population. Did these two things come together with that horrific killing that we got to see on the video up in Minneapolis?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing a nation and a global-wide attention to communities that have long been marginalized, have long been forgotten, in particular the African-American and the Hispanic and Latinx communities here in the United States, the Native American populations who has even higher rates of COVID-related deaths than any other population in this country. And you take those realities and then you marry it with, as you mentioned, the realities that have been happening for 400 years in the United States, and we're finally seeing a culmination and a true call to action. I am optimistic. I still am putting pressure on lawmakers. As you mentioned, it's not just about dismantling or defunding police departments nationwide, but it's truly about having very real and tough conversations around racism, around systemic oppression and white supremacy that for just a long time in this country we were afraid to have, and not having those conversations had led to and is leading to the full-on rebellion from all people who see that this is just completely unjust.
Finally, Professor, it strikes me you are a media professional. You teach media at a university. What's the role of the media here? What is the constructive role that the media can play in having those, as you say, difficult discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an associate professor of digital storytelling. I teach media literacy and documentary filmmaking. And within that triad that I just mentioned, the media is incredibly powerful. But what I teach my students is understanding we are at a time in all of our lives where we are bombarded with images constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it really takes a skill set to understand what is misinformation, what is disinformation. I don't like the term fake news, but there's things out there that are completely presented to cause chaos and dysfunction. We saw that last Tuesday when there was a whole Blackout Tuesday and what that meant, and there was a lot of misinformation around that topic. Who was this, sort of moment for? And it's really important that we pay attention. It's really important that we're critical of the information that comes across our feed. But if it wasn't for the capture on video of the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, and those are just what we've seen within the last 5 weeks in the United States. And we cannot forget Breonna Taylor in this entire conversation. And these are just, again, recent murders. If it wasn't filmed, I don't believe that we'd have the global outrage for these types of murders. So having the media and using the power of the image, we're truly seeing that you can't turn away. And when you can't turn away, you're forced to confront and face ugly truth.
Right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us. That's Imani Cheers. She is Associate Professor of Media at George Washington University. Coming up here, we have our stocks of the hour. Those travel stocks that got beaten down so badly, they may be on their way back. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Hey, y'all. Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
You've always relied on Bloomberg's strong Asian presence.
You didn't mention any particular areas in China. Let me just go to Hong Kong.
And now you need it even more.
Where are we in terms of understanding President Xi?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
We're starting to see infections in some of the Asian countries.
Tonight at 6 Eastern.
Do you ever get the feeling some people just weren't prepared?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Well, New York City is starting back up regular subway service today with a lot of social distancing restrictions in place. Earlier today, Pat Foy, he's the chairman of the MTA, the Metropolitan Transit Authority, talked with our Bloomberg Television.
Happily today, we're restoring full service on the subway. Service is good this morning. Last week, we did a physical survey of about nearly 50,000 customers, and mask compliance, which is now a part of state law, was 92%. The most important thing that our customers, the most important thing our customers can do is to wear masks to protect themselves and their co-commuters and our employees. And that 92% is an impressively high number and one we want to drive higher.
How are you going